Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you in the spirit of the trees, in the spirit of living nature, of which we are an integral part to this program on Humanity Rising. We are convening today our fourth session of a 5-day program on our endangered planet and our endangered ecosystem and our endangered species amongst a million other endangered species, so that we as a community can contemplate both the gravity of the crisis in which we find ourselves, but also the actions that we can take, even at this late hour, to enrich our biodiversity, to enrich our capacity to salvage what can be salvaged in a ravaged world for the environment and the larger ecosystem in which we find ourselves. Before we dive into our program, I want to invite you to take a moment to center yourself in your bodies. And if you can, just close your eyes and attune yourself with your heart. And for the next minute, in a spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving, feel the biodiversity, feel its loss, and also feel the actions that are taking place all over this world to revitalize the nature in which we find ourselves. Thank you, everyone. And now it's my pleasure to introduce my good friends and colleagues, Tom Eddington, who's the founder of Endangered Global, and George Cappannelli, who's the founder of Age Nation, both of whom have been co-convening this panel on our endangered planet. So George and Tom, I turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And George, it's always a delight to be sharing this with you. I'll start by introducing our panelists today. And for folks who are joining us today, I would encourage you, if you haven't seen the programming that we had on Monday with Jojo Mehta from Stop Ecocide International and Charles Eisenstein, Tuesday with John Perkins, and then yesterday, a wonderful group of folks from Wild Earth. And we've just had a great series of conversations this week and looking forward to today and tomorrow as well. So I'll start by just welcoming Sally Ranney. Good morning, Sally. Thank you for joining us. Sally has had an extraordinary multiple decades of work in the public and the private sector working across so many areas and has started a number of organizations and currently is the co-founder and president of Global Choices. And we look forward to hearing a bit more about that with you this morning, Sally.
Thank you.
Marina Well is joining us from Brussels and is the co-founder and CEO of WeForest, a reforest organization working around the globe to reforest the planet. And then Julia Wyden is joining us from Madison, Wisconsin at the University of Wisconsin Arboretum and has the responsibility for the citizen science programs that they do there, including the Monarch Butterfly. And so our theme of the day is around biodiversity loss and the work that's being done on the ground to revitalize and restore biodiversity. And the three of you in particular have a wonderful perspective, and we look forward to engaging you in dialogue on that today.
Sally, could you begin and give us some perspective on the work that you're currently doing, and just a little bit of your sense of both a few of the challenges and some of the opportunities we're currently facing?
Sure. Okay, great. Well, Global Choices is an all-women led and staffed organization, and we are focusing on the ice crisis, which is the loss of the cryosphere, all the ice on the planet. And in particular, we're looking at the Arctic ice shield, the Arctic Ocean ice shield, because it is diminishing rapidly, as everyone has seen in the news, that the ice is melting rapidly, 2 to 4 times faster than the rest of the planet, including it's faster than Antarctica. And why it is so critical is because it is our reflector of the sun's heat and radiation. And we've already lost 50 to 54% of that capacity. So this is a really urgent situation. And what we have done is, and we're science-driven, science-led, what we have done is looked at both what is happening with emission reductions and decarbonization in relationship to the loss of the sea ice, because what's happening is this is the epicenter really of climate change. Everything that everyone is doing in other regions of the world are absolutely necessary, but the magnification of global impacts, if we're complicit in letting the ice go, is catastrophic. Already the heat dome that literally boiled the tidal zone along the Pacific Northwest is related to sea ice loss, fires, more severe droughts and floods. The jet stream is wobbly, and ocean currents have changed, and they are all linked scientifically now to the loss of Arctic sea ice. So we're working in the policy arena around this at the international level to get global governments to start correlating the sea ice loss with how fast and how deep emission cuts and decarbonization investments at speed and scale have to take place in relationship to the loss of the sea ice, because the IPCC said in the 2021 report, if we stay at 1.5, and that's why the sea ice shield is the litmus of accountability for global leaders. If we stay at 1.5, the ice can naturally restore. So we have a variety of tactics, et cetera, around that, but that's basically what we're looking at. We're proposing a 10-year moratorium. We're working with climate scientists on these correlations of ice melt and emission cuts. And we're also pursuing a new governance model for global commons, because the Central Arctic Ocean is a high seas global commons under the law of the sea.
Thank you very much, Sally.
Marie Noel, do you want to pick up on that? Because you and I have had a number of conversations around the impact that reforestation has on preserving and protecting the sea ice and the planet's atmosphere.
Yes, absolutely. And I apologize if you have some background noise, which I can't control from here. So thank you for this opportunity. Indeed, very encouraged by what Sally has shared and what they're trying to achieve. We need everybody to join forces. It's like time to do that. And I see also a lot of initiatives that bring people together, like this forum, which also is encouraging. What I also see is that a lot of people don't know what really makes a difference, what they can do as a citizen. That's what they want to hear. And as far as I'm concerned, the simple message is obviously we have to reduce our emission, we have to fly less, we have to reduce meat consumption and all those good things. We also can win decades by restoring and protecting our forests. And this is not going to stop, it's not going to bend the curve on the carbon immediately because the trees yet have to grow, right? But it will make us win decades. And this is a very clear message. It's been calculated and, you know, you can discuss the numbers, but it's been said, if you restore an area or protect an area the size of the United States, right? This is gigantic. Well, you can, by doing that, by restoring such a big area in the world, you can actually sequester 2/3 of the excess carbon we have in the atmosphere. So 2/3 of 300 gigatons, that's huge. And in the meantime, while we do that, we can develop all kinds of alternative solutions to reduce our footprint and continue to live comfortably or as comfortably as we can. So this is an invitation for everyone, not just to go and plant trees in your garden, but be aware of how you consume and support organizations like WeForest to restore forests. And companies should engage, individuals should engage, government should be supportive as well.
Thank you, Marie. Julia?
Yes, thank you so much for having me here today. So I am the coordinator of a citizen science program called the Monarch Larva Monitoring Project. For anyone not familiar with citizen science, an alternate term you might hear is community science. It's essentially just the act of involving non-professional scientists into scientific research. And so the project that I coordinate has been around since the late 1990s. And essentially our goal is to collect long-term data on larval monarch populations across North America. And the reason this is important is because monarch butterflies are endangered. They, of course, occupy the majority of North America. And some of the threats that are facing their populations, relate to, I guess, in a smaller sense, what Marie Noel was talking about. Monarch butterflies, when they migrate and overwinter in Mexico, they have to roost in a specific type of tree, an oyamel fir tree. And those trees are certainly reducing in number due to deforestation and logging. And kind of sticking to the plant theme, many people might be aware, but monarch butterflies have to lay their eggs on a group of plants called milkweed. There's 100 of these species that are native to North America, but they're really that limiting factor. Without enough milkweed, they cannot lay their eggs. There is absolutely no hope for restoring these populations. Scientists estimate that to make even the smallest impacts on monarch butterfly populations, we need to be planting at least 1.3 billion milkweed stems across North America, which, seems, of course, like an absolutely enormous number, but the power of the monarch butterfly in being that they're such an iconic and keystone species is that there are so many people who just absolutely adore them and are aware of their conservation status. And are willing to, to take not only local conservation efforts in their garden or in their backyard, but also contribute to some, larger conservation efforts and management practices. So I'm happy to be here to kind of represent maybe a little bit of a smaller scale grassroots work that people are able to do to help with biodiversity loss in their homes. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you all for sharing your initial remarks. And the arc of the week is we started with what are the systemic and institutional forces that are at work, that are at play, that are preventing our political leaders, our industry leaders from doing the right thing. And as we've evolved the conversations over the course of the week, we've wanted to move to what's happening on the ground. What are each of the three of you doing, your organizations doing, and what are the things that people can be doing to continue to have a sense of hope, to continue to make a difference in the world. And as one of our speakers talked about this week, I mean, certainly, looking at our carbon footprint, reducing our plastic use, reducing what we eat, or being more conscious of what we eat. But there are some really practical and wonderful things the three of you and your organizations are doing. And so we'd like to spend some time and dialogue around those.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll go first. Yes, because we are dealing with complex Earth systems, life support systems, and everything is connected to everything. All these systems are interconnected, interdependent, interlinked. So we can't function in just, or make decisions fragmented in just one area without it's working locally with a global objective, a real global objective in mind. And one of the things that's a very practical, and we'll probably be creating an app along these lines, is 1 ton of CO2 equals 32 square feet of ice melt, or 3 meters squared, which is about two tons of ice. If you go from New York to London and doing it in square feet, you have melted 6 square meters of ice. So you can look at your own carbon footprint, and I've really started doing this myself. I hardly drive at all anymore. Unfortunately, I travel on airplanes like everybody else. I melted 65 square feet of sea ice when I went to Glasgow to the UN, International Climate Conference. And so we're in a great dilemma about the choices that we make. Buying clothing, there's a whole lineage of impacts behind clothing. And when you get to the end of that, from what I'm working on now, is it's ice melt. It's losing our albedo effect, which nobody on the planet is going to escape. And so tracking the lineage of, like, me consumer, me consumption, tracking that is really, really important, but also having a positive feedback to the person or the organization that's doing that, so that they know that they're linked into a global objective and they're truly, making a difference. The other thing is, on the economic side of it, we're looking at what does it take to really value in the economic system we have now, social and natural capital, if you will. So if we put forward, we're thinking about a fintech opportunity for our organization. How do you monetize the ice in relationship? And that's why I'm so interested in what you were talking about with forests, is linking in the economic market the benefit of the forests in relationship to protecting the ice cover. And that's a whole new pathway. We have to start thinking in really different pathways, if you will. There's another piece to all of this, is that sustainability is coupled with peace. You won't have enduring peace if you don't have sustainability, lasting sustainability. You can't escape that coupling. So in that process, we have been working with peace organizations and in bringing through that concept on the ground, because you're going to have, and we can see the conflicts that are happening. I mean, you know, Ukraine is beyond any of our imaginations. But, you know, if we don't come to terms with some of these pathways, these new pathways, and really chart them and invest in them, that's the other piece. We have to invest in these new pathways. And the last thing, which is starting to happen on the ground, and we've been working with several organizations and within our own organization as well, is we have to have a systemic decision-making protocol or lens, not protocol. Well, it is a protocol too, but a lens for making decisions. And that is, and this goes back to what I first said, the interlinkages. We have to start thinking and making decisions with a whole systems lens. Because I mean, literally, if we don't, we're toast. We have to do that. And so another thing we're working on is, what's it going to take for breaking through nationalism to be sure to ensure that we have a global community that's really come together around sustainability and climate change, urgent action now.
Yeah, thanks for connecting those dots, Sally. It's so essential, and unfortunately, our the systems that we're operating in, the systems that we're functioning in, and many of our leaders don't seem to be able to connect those dots in the way that you just have. And I'll invite Marie-Noelle into this conversation, as she's been on this journey over the last dozen years or so at We Forest, and it's been, as someone who has been watching the journey that she's been on, and Marie-Noelle, you can talk about the connection between trees and social justice and women's empowerment opportunities and the creation of rain and all of the systems that you and We Forest have discovered in your journey.
Yeah, I will definitely do that. I just would like to bounce on what Sally said and make it really visible. Like, we don't realize the cost of carbon. Like, I really liked what you said, Sally. You made it very tangible. You said 1 ton of CO2 is 3 square meters of ice gone, right?
Yes.
Well, when sometimes, there are some offsetting programs and stuff, but the real cost of CO2 is not provided, is not paid for. I was just doing on the back of an envelope, as you guys say in English, I think, the quick measurement here. You say, well, actually to absorb, because I'm in the business of planting trees, so I like to translate everything into trees, right? And see how many trees do we have to plant for a flight from New York to Los Angeles, for example. Just a quick example here. Well, for 1 ton, you need to plant 4 trees and wait for 30 years. That's on average, right? Like, say 4 trees, wait 30 years, and you have absorbed 1 ton. So from New York to LA, it's 5 tons that you are emitting. So you already need 20 trees planted and wait 30 years. If you want to be responsible, you need to plant 30 times more. So that means whatever you have emitted this year, you have to plant enough so that you can absorb this year. So imagine you have to plant 30 times 20 trees in order to offset your flight from New York to Los Angeles, really, if you are really being honest. So that's huge. So that's why people have to be made responsible for their footprint. Otherwise, it stays very theoretical. I'm emitting so many tons, but really realize what this means.
Yes.
And I think if we translate that into very specific metrics without making people feel bad, but just making them aware and translate that into the ice melting as well, I think it is very tangible. So that being said, I'm going to respond to your suggestion, Tom, which indeed, what do we do and how do we do that? So WeForest is an NGO that is based in Belgium, in Europe, and we work in the tropics. Why in the tropics? Because this is where the trees grow fastest. This is where the local population needs it most. And this is also where the trees are most efficient from a climate perspective. I'm not going to dive into too much of the science, but it's about the albedo and also the humidity and the heat. So basically, we've chosen to work in the tropics. And indeed, the benefits of restoring forests, protecting them or planting them is not just for the trees that I mentioned and the absorption of the carbon. You have to remember that half of the biomass of a tree is carbon that is sequestered until you decide to burn that tree. It is there. So that's pretty powerful. But the other benefits that Tom was mentioning is when you do that, you do so much more than just regulate climate. It's a miracle solution for the world for most of the problems that we're facing today. It's a solution for climate. It's a solution for poverty alleviation because it creates jobs for people who have nothing. It brings dignity so people have a future and they have perspective and don't have to leave their country and come to Europe to try, a better life. They get a job there in the projects, for example, where we work. And it's very often a job for women, which is wonderful because, in Africa, for example, and in many other places, if you give women an opportunity, you transform society. So that's what we do. And it's an opportunity for soil restoration. And here we're going to talk about biodiversity. The soil dies if you don't have vegetation, if you don't have trees, if you don't maintain it. The trees keep the soil alive. And then when the soil is restored, only then can you imagine planting other crops and live from it. So if you want to feed people, you have to restore forests first in order to restore and bring humus back. So I could go on with a very long list of all the benefits besides climate. And I would love, before the end of this call, just to give you a feel, but I'll wait a little bit, about the animals returning, the biodiversity that we have in those projects. It's just so inspiring to see that on top of all those benefits for us, we have all that biodiversity that can be returning also for us, by the way.
Well, you'll have that opportunity, Marie-Noelle. I also want to just mark for our viewers that both Sally and Marie-Noelle are talking about information and awareness. Before action can take place, the kind of information, and both of you are also being very specific in your information. And I think that what we're failing to do today is to educate people sufficiently on the kinds of details that you're both giving. That gives individuals such a tangible ground to begin to not only be aware, but to decide on next actions. Julia, let's give you a chance to weigh in on this. And then I have another issue to talk about how we move past the structures of traditional information. Like, for an example, for me, the UN is a place where great ideas go to die. And we need to find a place where great ideas can go someplace so that they regenerate and they explode and they integrate. But let's talk about that later. Julia, where are you on this conversation?
Yeah, so my perspective being from that of working in the field of citizen science, I think that citizen science can be such a transformational educational opportunity from people of all backgrounds. It's a relatively new field that kind of we've been talking about just the past few decades, but the opportunity to engage people from the public in scientific research, to have them, and not exclusively just with monarchs, but there are thousands upon thousands of really significant citizen science projects across the globe. You're connecting people not only to their environment, but you're connecting them to a community of people who care like they do, or who want to learn more. And I think that can have, like I said, such a transformational impact on how we connect with our environment, how we think about kind of lifelong education. The projects that I coordinate are primarily, fueled by, retirees who have all of this time and they want to make a difference. And, they're thinking about their children and their grandchildren's generation and what can I do to make an impact? And so from the Monarch larva monitoring project that I coordinate, it's really simple methodology. It's go into your garden, go into a local nature area, park, look at milkweed plants, count the eggs, tell us what you see there, but do that every single week over the course of a season and watch how it changes. And really get connected to that life cycle and this really just phenomenal and kind of magical experience of migration and seasonal cycles. So I try to promote citizen science just as much as I can because I think it's so significant. And then in another aspect of my career, so I also am the founder and executive director of a Canadian nonprofit organization called Terranaut Club. And we do science and nature exploration for Girls Plus, so that's girls and underrepresented genders in Atlantic Canada. And when I started the nonprofit in 2018, it was after a few years of doing research in marine conservation. And let me tell you, that can be very depressing research to do. I'm sure that both, Sally and Marie Noel agree with that. Sometimes it can be just so overwhelming. And so I was really kind of dragged down by all this. And I thought, what can I do to really feel like I'm making an impact? And that was providing educational opportunities for children and youth to learn about their environment, to connect with nature. And overall, our mission is, encouraging Girls Plus to pursue STEM careers and become environmental leaders in their own communities. When I started, I really thought okay, I'm going to have to convince these kids that climate change is real. I'm going to have to convince them to care about their environment. And I couldn't have been more wrong. And it was such a beautiful moment for me because the kids understood. They absolutely understood the need to protect our environment. There was no convincing necessary. It was just this natural understanding of course, we should be protecting our environment. Just in the realm of talking about educational opportunities, I think, kind of building these generations of children and youth that are more aware, that really understand what we have to lose. And a lot of the programming that we do, once again, incorporates citizen science. And overall, we're really trying to just create an increase in understanding and respect for science, and really improve their scientific literacy so that when they read and when they learn about these things, they kind of understand how to digest it and how to transform that into action. So yes, happy to chat more about that, but I'll leave it right there for now.
Well, your concept of your conversation about citizen science is a lot like the conversation about citizen activism and engagement. And what I'm amazed at is that we continue to live in a world where we are like little children sitting on the sidelines waiting for parents to act. Our parents are the institutions and the organizations and a lot of the old relics that are still in the way of constructive advance in our world. And whether it's you, Sally, when you talk about the fact that the organizations have to come together and look holistically at the issue rather than just working on individual parts or whatever this happens to be. How do you imagine that we are ever going to grow up enough as citizens in a population to bypass the obstacles that are being put in place by institutions and governments and tired old people who are out of touch with reality?
Well, it's a really good question. A couple things I'd like to say before I forget, though, is Julia, the citizen science piece that you're engaged in is critical. I want you to know I have planted milkweed. I'm in Colorado at 7,400 feet, and it's been a challenge, but it's coming along. I just want you to know. But you should know about Hearts in the Ice. It's two incredible women, they're partners of ours, who spent 19 months. They were the first women to overwinter in the Arctic by themselves. And they have a website, and they were citizen scientists while they were doing this. So I wanted to link you with them. The other thing is the National Wildlife Federation. I'm on that board, and we have an amazing wildlife garden for-profit that we've put together that is all indigenous plants. And I think I can put you in touch with them as well. I think that could be quite helpful to you. And then the other thing, Marie, I wanted to link you to the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network. I was a co-founder, and now I'm just a senior advisor to them. But they work with indigenous people, all women, actually, on the front lines of climate change. And one of our projects is in the Congo, and they're planting trees. So, and we've been in the Tongass, Ecuador, Brazil, etc. So I can put you in touch with them. The other thing I wanted to say is around the UN. What are the pathways? And our moratorium is for the Central Arctic Ocean. If you can imagine the Arctic Circle and the Arctic Ocean in the middle of it, and in the middle of that is the Central Arctic Ocean, which is non-jurisdictional. Nobody owns it yet. The Russians would like to have it. But our moratorium, we are not going through the UN. We're not going through the treaty process. We're not going through the resolution process, just for the reason you said, is that it'll be 25 years before they make a decision and the ice will be gone. So we're charting new pathways. We're linked into Cambridge University. One of our advisors is the former European Union Parliament advisors on the Arctic, and both are international attorneys. And we've been drilling down, and we're touching base with other attorneys. What is this is going to be a hybrid, what we do. And it's going to go around the UN. And it's going to be the signatories on this, the endorsers, are going not just be, and this gets to the other question you had, it's not just the Arctic nations. Stakeholders are island nations now. Stakeholders are Northern Africa that are having severe droughts and severe floods. And there's 21.5 million climate refugees right now, and it's climbing every day. So the stakeholders now, because now we finally get it, this interrelationship of all these systems, the stakeholders now are global as far as nations go, and people on the ground who are doing the work like Marie is doing and Julia are doing, they have to rise up in the existing system and demand some of these changes, and do that by creating an alternative. That's what we're doing. We're creating an alternative that can be replicated for other high seas areas. Now, our moratorium, believe it or not, the ice is melting so fast. We're in great danger, but yet companies and countries are wanting to deep sea bed mine, explore for oil and gas. So these are some of the activities that we're proposing be prohibited for 10 years so that science and policy and hopefully deep emission cuts can start catching up. So no deep seabed mining, no oil and gas exploration and exploitation, no transpolar shipping route. There is a proposal for a shipping route to go right across the North Pole. And we already have the Northwest Passage and the Northern Passage along Russia, which is basically a toll road, if you will. No radioactive waste dumping. Russia has dumped in the Kara Sea, which is in the Arctic Ocean. No nuclear weapon testing, and no seismic testing. You know, and we've done deep studies on all of this, and there's lots of pieces. So only 10 years because nobody would sign on if it was longer. But it gives us time to then really look at this correlation of sea ice melt to exactly how deep and how fast emission cuts and carbonization has to take place. They have to be correlated. We don't have a plan for that. There's no definitive plan for that, yet it can be done. And the science and the model and the modeling technology is there. We just have to do it. And then, you know, as you said, George, then we have to translate it into very complex concepts, have to be translated into very simple terms. So we're trying to go around the system in that, and in that process, bring the whole system's lens and decision-making with it, which is a systemic change, you know, and then working on the ground with organizations like Women's Earth and Climate Action and One Earth, and I mean, the list goes on and on, so, because everything is linked. Everything is linked. The other thing I want to say is kind of going around the system is that we are linking loss of the Arctic sea ice can be linked to almost any other activity that conservation environmentalists and scientists are doing, whether it's regen ag, whether it's reforestation, whether it's restoring mangroves, whether it's ocean acidification, whatever it is. So we're starting to articulate that connection so that people can really understand, oh my gosh, you know, I don't have any irrigation water, you know, this summer. I'm talking about myself, but it's a lot of other people. I have irrigation for 2 weeks. It's done. Last year, I didn't have one drop of irrigation water. You talk about scary, you know, so that's the other piece is, okay, if you're experiencing this, which almost everybody on the planet is now, then how do you link that experience to what's going on? And then awareness means nothing if it doesn't translate into informed action. So people have to know the 1, 2, 3. Okay, I got it. This is how it relates. This is what I do. This is what I can do. This is who I can link into.
You're a force of nature, obviously, in what you're doing, you know, really. And I want to keep stressing for our viewers and our listeners that the Sally Ranneys of the world and the Marie Noels and the Julias, they can only be successful when we are involved. When we're not involved, when we're not policing the actions and the reactions that need to happen, then all of the work that's done advances the game, but it doesn't ultimately change the game. We need to be involved at a much greater level. When something happens somewhere that that infinitesimal rise in degree or temperature, we have to monitor that and start yelling and screaming at our politicians and at our legislators in various ways. But unfortunately, that's the piece that's missing. You're right, awareness and then action, informed action, but it's getting the awareness way up so that somebody who has irrigations problems in their yard relates that to the condition. Anyway, I'll step out of that. I don't want to keep banging away.
Well, no, but I'll just add something that's so interesting. And this is what all of us, I think, may come up to in, whatever issues we're working on, is I put out a call to form a water resilience alliance for this area that I live in. And I got one response.
Yeah.
I sent it out to maybe 45 neighbors. And I got one response. So I'm going to keep sending it out, and I'm going to keep sending out, the drought maps for the West and all the rest of it, and just keep educating people as much as I can. And then I'll send out another request, and I'll bet you I get a lot more. And then somebody else is going to have to take it on because I can't. I just want to get it moving.
Sally, picking up on the awareness piece and bringing it back to something you were sharing, Julia, about young people. I made the observation several years ago that I genuinely believe, like the caterpillar that has the imaginal cells that aren't butterfly cells or caterpillar cells that make it possible for the caterpillar to become a butterfly. Mm-hmm. The children coming into the world today have something equivalent to imaginal cells. And they have that awareness that you were talking about. So how do we as adults support them? Whether we're talking elementary school, middle school, high school children, college students, young people in their 20s. How do we as adults support them because they already have that awareness?
Could I have to exit at 10 o'clock. I think you all know that.
Yep.
Or whatever, 9 o'clock your time, I think it is. So I'd just like to add a couple things because I am going to have to go. I have another webinar presentation, but anyway, about youth, the viability and the visibility and the amplification of their voices is so important, particularly young women. So because in my organization, we're approaching this from the feminine, we're all women, as I said, staff and et cetera. Our advisory board is both men and women, and our board is men and women, but the on the ground in the trenches is women. And we have something called the Arctic Angels. And the Arctic Angels, we have almost, 50 Arctic Angels in 29 or 30 countries now. And they are ice ambassadors. And they are briefed on not just the moratorium and the global commons and the correlation with emissions, but they are starting to loop in the Arctic to whatever forum they're speaking, to whatever platform they're on, social media platform, or whatever they're doing, on the ground. And that's the kind of education. There's a climate literacy piece that is really important. We've been working with Prince Charles's education program based on, it's called Harmony. And he came up with 7 principles, and it's for grade school and I would say middle school primarily, but it's based on inquiry. So it's flipped education sort of on its head, if you will, because it's really asking the students and showing the students through actually doing, whether it's something outside or taking their school and putting it on renewable energy and calculating all that and then linking it into what we need at scale, globally, so that there's a link there. And it's a very innovative approach to its whole system. That's the other thing. So we have been trying to develop some curriculum around the Arctic and the Antarctic based on the harmony principles. But our Arctic angels are extraordinary young women, extraordinary. I mean, they are known climate activists with networks in their own country. But now we're all linked into that. The second piece of that is the Arctic Ice Force. The Arctic Ice Force will be launching, I hope, this year, and that's open to everybody, any age, any gender, any culture, any religion, doesn't matter. And we will start building it out strategically in countries that are getting the most impact from climate change, and around the hubs will start around the locations of our Arctic angels. The other piece is the Arctic Legal Defense Fund, which we're also putting together. And that links into our Arctic Task Force, Arctic, and we have shipping experts and scientists and a variety of attorneys, et cetera. But this gets back to what I was saying about us bypassing the UN. What is the new hybrid? What does that look like? And then we're doing the science piece with the correlation, which I've mentioned before. So we're, and then we do high level advocacy. I've been meeting with ambassadors and, all kinds of people at very high levels, just to bring them. You'd be surprised how many don't know the magnitude. And they know that it's melting. The Arctic's up there, the Antarctic's down there, and I'm here and I got to do this. Yes, you do, but let's do this in relationship to that, and so connecting the dots really, really, really is important. And even heads of state, it's remarkable to me that, that they don't have this. So we have a summary brief that's like 10 pages, which has been reviewed by scientists. They think it's fabulous. And we've got a 48-page or something like that, all with citations behind that to give to the staffs, of environmental ministers and because they need to know all the pieces. And and then you've got and then we have the geopolitical. How do we get around Russia? Russia has the longest coastline in the Arctic, and they have more permafrost than anybody else, which is melting really fast. They should be focusing on that, not the Ukraine. So we're trying to do transformational strategies versus transactional strategies. And I think, this is a long distance run. This is not a sprint, but now the climate clock, if you all know the climate clock, there's a huge one in Times Square. It says we have 6.7 years. There's something like, 75 scientists that link into that. And all climate clocks around the world now are synchronized. And I think now it says, I haven't looked at it, 6.7 years to make a measurable difference to avoid the worst of climate change. We're not going to avoid climate change now. that horse left the stall. But we still have time to make a measurable difference. And that's why citizen uprising, informed citizen uprising. And one of our Arctic angels is Shea Bastida, who started Fridays for the Beach in New York and did that 400,000, person march. She's one of our Arctic angels. And they're all sort of like that. I mean, it's amazing. I just kind of sit at their feet, and say, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here because I need to retire at some point." So, I think that everything that everybody is doing is absolutely critical. All hands on deck. And before I leave, I'd just like to say that I would like to link as much as we can to the loss of the ice shield, because it is what is going to change this planet the fastest, because it's melting so fast. And just what Marie Noel said is, you plant the trees, it takes 20 years, 30 years, and we have to plant the trees. There's no question about that. But we have to address this. And that's political action. And governments, business, last thing, business cannot fill the gap that governments have left. They can do a huge, huge job, but we need government buy-in because they have the funds, they have the regulatory capacities, it goes on and on. So we have to have governments really come together. And this is where the ice is so interesting, because it provides an opportunity for sort of unsuspecting allies to work together. So it can be kind of a glue, if you will, or an attractor for all these different sectors, because just go, oh my God, we have to do something now.
Well,
Thank you, Sally.
Today, and more importantly, thank you for all the work you're doing.
Yep.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me. I feel really honored, and I would love to have the emails of all of you, if I could. Yeah, and I'd love to put Marie, Nicole, and Noel and Julia in touch with these organizations, because I think it could be, really good collaborations.
Happy to make that possible. So
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Have a wonderful day.
So Julia, do you want to pick up on the question I posed about how do we support the youth?
Yeah, absolutely. So fostering and nurturing that, I think, natural curiosity about what is going on is so important. But specifically when we're working with children and youth, I think it's so important when we start talking about, climate change and biodiversity loss. It cannot be all fear mongering, right? It's so important to, protect their optimism. And there's a book that I read a little while ago, you might be familiar with. It's called Project Drawdown. And one of the messages in it that I have really clung to in these past few months that I think is really going to impact kind of how I do my environmental education and STEM education is that it's not game over, it's game on. And I think that's a really important message that we share with the children and youth that we're working with, right? We know a lot of what these problems are. We have a lot of solutions figured out. So, this isn't the end. The world is not on fire yet. Certainly we are approaching this point, but there is still time. And we know the actions that we need to take. We know what we need to do. So yeah, really just kind of, I think, nurturing the kids to, learn more, understand that it can be frightening. But humanity has gotten this far because of our resourcefulness, right? We have come this far for a very specific reason. So, we can figure our way out of this. So yeah, I love that. I love game on, not game over. And I think certainly as a parent or as an adult, just being an ally, I think we're going to see more and more some kind of intergenerational resentment maybe in the coming years. And so I think, you know, being an adult, maybe highlighting the fact that, you know, some of this information is relatively recent, right? You know, we're kind of learning as we go, and placing blame can be helpful sometimes, but not all of the time. So I think keeping that dialogue really open, and making sure children and youth understand that, you know, it can be frightening, but we know what we need to do, and we all have the capacity to do it. So yeah, I think that's what I would add to it. But it's anytime that I work with children and youth, you know, it's not my desired effect, but I think I sometimes get more out of it than they do because of the inspiration that I feel from their willingness to learn, and their just simple understanding of course we need to protect our homes. Of course we need to do that. So yeah, thank you for asking that question.
Julia, I have a new job for you.
Okay, let's hear it.
In addition to your current job and in addition to your foundation in Canada, I would like you to be responsible for initiating the formation of a global youth council.
I'll add it to my list, George.
No, I actually, no, truly, I'm kidding about your responsibility, but what I'm saying is that to bypass the tired old nonsense that is like, what do they call it when the arteries get clogged? The consciousness of the planet is clogged by old thinking and awkward systems of behavior and interaction with one another. To have a United Nations of children, of young people who put out their ideas, who demonstrate what action really looks like, could be such a model for the world at a time when it's so desperately needed. And you're right, people of a certain age already understand all of this. They don't require education and convincing. So anyway, think about it, would you?
I absolutely will. And I think one of the benefits of this conversation and many like this is, like Sally was doing such a wonderful job of, you know, kind of connecting myself and Marie Noel with some other institutions and organizations doing similar things. So George, there are some groups out there, youth-led climate action that do exist. And so sometimes I think, right, it's kind of being aware of the groups that do exist and how can we support each other. I think like Sally said, how can we amplify their voices?
Yes.
But I'll add it to the list. Thank you for the suggestion.
Thank you.
And Marie Noel, can you share a bit more about what you're seeing on the ground in the communities when the reforestation activities are happening?
Yeah, I will do that, but every time you ask me a question, I have an answer before that. Because I'm just so inspired by what I'm hearing. If I may just follow on this, like awareness, how do we create awareness, young people, but also everybody? And in one of the previous sessions that we had together, somebody came with a painting, if you remember, and showed an animal, a bird, and said, this bird is gone, if you remember that. And for me, this was so moving, because this really is what we're talking about. It was gone. And it was so real that I think we as scientists and as practitioners, we have a responsibility to not look smart, that nobody cares whether we're smart or not. We need to be impactful, and to be impactful, we need to touch hearts. And for that, we need to speak real things. We shouldn't be using jargon, biodiversity, nobody knows, and it doesn't touch anybody's heart when you say biodiversity. But when you show an animal that's gone extinct, that's what you want to do. When Sally was talking about the ice and measuring and saying, okay, every ton is 3 meters, you can visualize that. That's what we have to do. We have to translate those scientific messages that nobody gets into something real, and then people will act. If they understand, they will act. That's what I'm learning. So my job, yes, I'm a practitioner, I'm a scientist, but my job is translating messages so people get it.
Yes.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Tom, actually, it's amazing. When I walk in Ethiopia in the project, for example, you think people don't know what's happening. The people living there, they know exactly. They know the climate has changed. They know exactly what has caused that. They just don't have the means to transform this because they're so poor. They live with less than $1 a day. Sometimes the whole family lives with that they have no solution, and they either emigrate illegally to find something else, or they go to the cities and then try to find a different job and leave the farms. So that is humbling to see these people know and they want to do something. We just have to be there at the right moment and provide whatever is needed. And I would like to share some, because Sally delivered very strong messages, and it's like, well, what are we going to do with all of that, right? Well, I want to share that some positive messages as well, that we can make a real difference in when we work like we do, we forest in locally for the people and for the animals and for the fauna and flora. I want to give some examples of what we achieved last year, just a few things here. Last year, We Forest has worked in 15 different sites, and our sites are mainly across Africa, the tropics, and Brazil. And we restored 10,000 hectares, which is, I think, 24,000 acres. For that, we planted or protected 14 million trees. So imagine that, 14 million trees is what we did last year. Since the beginning of We Forest, we've done like 65 million trees, and we'll be reaching 100 million trees very quickly. So 14 million trees is what we've restored and planted. And over time, we know that 77% of the trees survive. So you see, there is some mortality, obviously, but that's kind of to give you a feel. It's worth it. 77% survive. And it's not like we're watering them or anything. We just let nature act. And the interesting thing here is, guess how many different species across those 15 sites we have chosen to plant or to protect? Like how many different species? Just give me a number. Close to 600. Close to 600. I didn't even know before I started this work that there were so many species of trees, right? So imagine, that's huge, because that's what you need to do. If you have a very diverse forest, like native forests are, that's when you bring wildlife back. Otherwise, if you just plant eucalyptus, then everything dies. So it's not about planting trees, it's about doing the right job. And so out of those 600 species, 88% were native trees. Sometimes you add different trees in agroforestry, but otherwise the big number is native trees. Very important because they are suitable for the local people, they're suitable for the local animals. And then out of those, we have inventoried 16 IUCN threatened trees that we have identified and that we're purposely adding and expanding. So they're threatened or they almost disappeared, and we are monitoring them like individually almost. So that is also something that we do. And you need to remember that 80% of the world's species, animals and plants, are hosted in forests. So forests are not just the source of climate solution, they're the source of biodiversity in the world, our medicine, our food, right? And then just as a consequence of that, if you have a great forest thriving, you see animals returning. So we do something really fun, actually. We record the sound of nature, we record the DNA of nature, and we take pictures of nature. And what do we see? Well, when we take the sound of nature, we do that to the Rainforest Connect people that you know, Tom. Remember the people, yeah?
Yes.
We have 120 devices, for example, in the Brazil forest, and there we record all the insects and all the birds, and there's a database that matches, say, oh, this animal is so present, or this one is not appearing. Very interesting to match that and to see what life is there. Then we have in Senegal, for example, the eDNA sampling. So we sample in the water and in the soil the fauna and flora DNA. And it's amazing because we spotted a pangolin species that we thought had disappeared in the mangroves. So look at that. That's really amazing, isn't it? And the last one is we have camera traps in Brazil, for example, camera traps. And then anytime there's a movement, it takes pictures. And what animals have we seen? Because we have got pictures of them. Well, in Brazil, we have ocelot, puma, jaguar, and tapir returning. Isn't that something? I mean, it's magic for us when we just plant trees. We see all these amazing animals coming back. And in Zambia, guess what? We have leopards, baboon, hyenas, and even elephants coming back. So that's just miracle. And I wanted to say something like that as well, that it's worth it, not just for climate.
There is such a level of truth and innocence in your communication. It's a blessing. A blessing.
Thank you, George.
Yeah. That's exactly, I think, when you talk about, the image of the bird and the fact that it speaks to the heart. Well, your language does the same thing, and it's very needed. Very needed. So where do we go from here? How do we take just some of the lessons that we've talked about in the last hour or so, all of the good work that Sally does and you do, Marie-Noelle, and you do, Julia, the understanding about young people and their intuitive understanding, the recognition that a lot of our institutions have clogged arteries of consciousness, among other things. What can we do? Programs like this, of course, help. But what else can we do? What can we do, first of all, to support each of your works individually? And then what else can we do collectively?
I think we have to deliver a positive message of hope. Again, as I said before that trees are going to buy us time. When Sally said we have a few years before global warming is happening, no, it's already happening. It's already there. Here I'm in Belgium. It used to be raining all the time. It's dry now. We're already in water restriction and it's May. The summer hasn't even arrived. This is Belgium. I mean, it's unbelievable. So you're not talking about North Africa. So global warming has happened already. It's just like, how can we limit it a little more? So we have no choice than go like crazy about restoring, protecting our forests. There's no other treasure in the world, plus all the other activities, and everything's needed. But that is a low-hanging fruit, definitely. And that's the message. We sometimes sound like a broken record, but we don't know anything better. I don't know anything better than a tree to do all the things that we talked about.
Julia?
Yeah, and I will just, George, your comments about Marie-Noelle's words, and Marie-Noelle, I think I just loved what you shared about all of those animals coming back. I think that's so beautiful. And like you mentioned, the importance of spreading a message of hope. I think that it can be really paralyzing sometimes to learn about some of these things. And I think one of our instincts can be to just, right, you turn a blind eye, or you shut the book, or you close your computer and say, I can't handle anymore right now. But there's so much power in your mouth, in the ability to talk to other people about this. Keep that message positive. Be gentle in the way that we speak to others about the environment. There's so much power in our hands, right? And once again, going back to citizen science and planting trees, there's so much that we can do that we don't always realize. It's not just, clicking on a keyboard, it's getting out in your garden. And there's also, and I hate to bring it back to money, but there's power in your wallet too. The ability to support organizations that are already doing some of this work. And, from my experience, starting a very small nonprofit, there's so much impact that you can make in supporting large organizations like WeForest, absolutely, and also smaller organizations that are working on a local level trying to do important work. MLMP is a great example. The Monarch Larva monitoring projects that I coordinate, a great example of getting involved in what it can lead to. And research actually shows, not only from the MLMP but other citizen science programs, that if people get involved in citizen science, they are likely to engage in other conservation actions as well. So trying to think of some of these almost like gatekeeping experiences that we can expose different people to just get their foot in the door, kind of take that first step that, hopefully opens up their eyes and like I said, their mouths and hands and wallets, right, to continue doing some of this really, really important work. But I will stress again, just the importance of hope and optimism. And once again, it's game on, it's not game over. We know what we need to do. So I feel like I should make a donation to Project Drawdown now for how many times I've been saying that today, but don't reinvent the wheel, right? That's a message I love. Game over, or game on, not game over. So yeah.
Julia, could I invite you to just share with our viewers and listeners the migration of the monarch butterfly leaving Mexico, making its way up to Canada? And it's not a single butterfly, but it's generations of butterflies, and how that can be a metaphor in some respects for the work that's needing to be done across multiple generations.
Absolutely, great question. You set me up for a good one there. So when monarch butterflies are migrating back up from Mexico, there are multiple generations that it takes to actually complete that migration before the cycle continues all over again. And the lifespan of some of these migratory generations that are kind of moving north and breeding as they go can be, like 2 to 6 weeks. But the lifespan of the generation of monarchs that migrate back down to Mexico can be 7 to 9 months. And I just love the idea of, these generations building upon each other, kind of passing the torch, right? Working together to make that forward movement. And, you never know who is going to have that really important big impact, but I think really highlights the importance of that connectivity and, this kind of big picture thinking and connecting the dots like Sally was talking about. Monarchs are such an iconic and keystone species. They're so culturally significant to many different countries. And I think they're a really important symbol of, metamorphosis, right? And migration and this positive change we're hoping to move towards.
I know those of you who have been really so incredibly generous in your sharing today on the chat. I want to acknowledge the contributions that you're making. And I apologize that sometimes we're so engaged in these dialogues that we don't get a chance to incorporate more of your comments. I want you to know that they don't go unheard, and I want you to know that they're recorded and that we have a library of them that we will work with over time, and that in another generation of humanity rising that is being explored, audiences are going to have a chance to play a much more integrated part in the conversations. So you matter, is what I'm trying to say to you. Jim, would you come back in? And in the time remaining, maybe there are some questions or comments you have.
Well, first of all, I want to echo what George just said about the chat group. It's been a marvelous stream of affirmation and enthusiasm for what you're doing, Marie Noel and Julia and Sally. The one and it's not a proposal, but the one comment I guess that I would make is that it feels to me that what we're all doing is necessary but not sufficient. I think we are past the time when you, Marie Noel, Julia, Tom with Endangered Global, all of us, we're all doing our own thing as valiantly and as courageously as we can. And the reality is we're not making the difference required to save ourselves. So it feels to me that, to your point earlier in the call, George, that the movement needs to do something it's never done before. And that is to move beyond all of us kind of doing our own thing and collaborating sort of as we can. But I was struck that with Sally's story that she sent 45 neighbors a request to get together and only got one response. I think that's the heart of our problem. The new UN is not the UN, it's us, the movement. And that's one thing that built Humanity Rising is we went out and got hundreds and hundreds of organizations to support us. And we're not even a drop in the bucket of what needs to be done. And so this conversation is brought up for me again, if there was some way we could get some leadership in the ecological movement. Just imagine if everybody involved in trying to save the ecology or the planet would come together for, say, 7 days. And the only thing on the agenda was how do we all begin to work together synergistically to make this happen. So that what Sally's doing and what you're doing, Marie Noel, and what you're doing, Julia and Tom, are all happening in a conscious relationship. Because if that could happen, the world would change. But absent that, I don't believe any longer that we're going to make the necessary difference, because the centrifugal force of the climate emergency combined with government inaction and corporate greed is stronger than we are. We just saw what happened in Ukraine. And that has put all of a sudden climate change on the back burner. That's not going to get better. There seems to me there's only one option left, and that is to really answer George's question in a radically new way that we've never been able to achieve before. I understand that this is the bane of the left. There's never been a time in history, actually, where the left has been able to organize with the same unanimity as the right. But that, in my view, is the only option left. So anyway, I wanted to just bring that in to our conversation, because this has made me feel even more urgently the need for this next level of leadership for the movement. I'd just love you to hear your comments.
Yes, Jim, thank you so much. May I just say something? Because I have this morning spoken to a group of people who is trying to address exactly this. And I think they have,
Brilliant.
I mean, I'm going to connect you and Tom to this group, because obviously I'm just going to be part of them. I'm not leading it. It's called Our Planet, Our Future, and it's going to go live in the fall. And it's based on, I'm sure Tom has been connected to them, the faith leader around the world trying to transform things. And I think they have the ingredients, the funding, the leadership, the basis, like with all the faith leaders around the world for the community representation to succeed. So I've been in discussion with them this morning, and things are going to start to happen. So our responsibility, all of us here, is to connect all these people doing things, make them stronger, give them everything we have, give them every connection and network that we have. The same in our field, like for example, we are nonprofit. And so we are by nature in our DNA seeking for partnerships. We're looking for all the other planting organizations to work with them, because that's the only way we're going to make it happen. So we have now a coalition of similar, like-minded people of our size that work together for a common goal. And that's what I invite everybody to do in your field, because alone we can't do it. If we practice that, if we share and connect, I think it could happen. I'm actually quite hopeful, because I see a lot of leaders waking up. It's like we're hitting the wall and then people are waking up.
We're hitting the wall, and we have to engage in radical collaboration in a very short period of time to make the difference we must make to save ourselves. I mean, I don't know a more concise way to put both the magnitude of the crisis, but also the opportunity that's inherent in the crisis.
Yeah.
And if I may, we have to also take down the guardrails. We have to work outside of the lines as well as inside of the lines.
Yeah.
We can no longer depend on the current pathways that exist to save us. We must recognize that just as we must invent new strategies, we must invent new pathways, and we must always do that at the same time with an understanding of the rules of human engagement and the things we must do to work at this, not out of anger, not out of any of those things, but out of a sense of rightness and righteousness. And it's so necessary. It's the only way. Not only must we do what we haven't done before, but we must do it with the deep understanding of the laws of nature and the laws of human decency and goodness.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to comment also, George, on something I heard in this call, I think by Sally, about bypassing the UN. And indeed, the solution is not going to come from there. The big events, the big COPs where people fly, full flights full of people going there and congratulating each other, where actually the boat is sinking, doesn't make any sense. We're not attending those anymore. We're just doing the job that we have to do. Honestly, it's a total waste of time to go to those events. That's my personal view. Yeah. And then if we do what we just said, and we focus on the women being the leader in many places, you will see things can change. Because look at watch TV and you see who's in charge for whatever is happening. It's always man, and that's why things aren't changing. We need to transform that, and that's an easy one. 50% of the people out there waiting to have their turn to transform this world and grab a big chunk of it. And so I think we have to consciously do that.
I agree, and I think that whether it's man or woman, we have to stop waiting. We have to stop looking for permission from someone else in order for us to step forward and do what needs to be done. We just, as you say, have to do it. And as you said, Julia, we have to get away from the keyboards and out into our gardens. We have to do things and stop talking about and waiting and hoping that someone's going to give us permission. We don't need permission. We have what I call the power of one, which is the power of who we are by virtue of our birth, and that entitles us to do all of the things that we need to do to save this planet, to save democracy, to save each other.
Tom, do you want to give us a preview of what's going to happen tomorrow?
I do, and I'll jump in listening to this last bit of the conversation. James Taylor, the singer-songwriter in the late 1990s, wrote a song called Gaia. And one of the refrains in the song is "Save us from us." And it's just such a wonderful reminder of we have it within us to do the right thing. And I'm excited about tomorrow's conversation. We frame tomorrow as what's happening and what can we do from a biodiversity loss perspective from the citizens' point of view. And we've got 4 panelists with us tomorrow that collectively will be engaging in the conversation around creativity, Indigenous wisdom, and strategic thinking. And so I invite all of you to join us tomorrow to listen to Dr. Michael Ray, considered to be the most creative man in Silicon Valley, talking about creativity in the most popular course at Stanford University, his course on creativity. And Stephen Kowalski and Marilyn King and Alain Gauthier. And so we'll be engaged in a wonderful conversation around creativity, Indigenous wisdom, and strategic thinking to help us move beyond all the impediments, all the obstacles, and celebrate the work that Marie Noel and We Forest and Julia Wyden and the work being done with the citizen scientists and Sally Ranney and her organization. So thank you all for the wonderful conversation today.
Thank you, Tom. And now, in the spirit of your last remark, Marie Noel, I think it's only prudent to give the women, you and Julia, the final word. So is there anything, starting with you, Julia, that you would like to leave our global community with?
Yeah, so first, just thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. I admit I was initially a little bit overwhelmed at my other panelists, and I'm really impressed just about all of the work that they've done. So thank you for offering me this opportunity, but also this panel. You know, we've had 3 women today talking, and in terms of amplifying voices, I appreciate that. So much respect to you for allowing us to share our message. And otherwise, just get out there, everyone. You know, use your hands, your mouth, your heart, your wallet, all of the resources available to you. And connect as much as you can with people who are already, you know, involved in this work to try to keep your spirits up and that momentum going. So thank you very much, and best of luck with the rest of your programming.
Game on.
Game on.
Thank you so much, Julia. Marie Noel.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Jim, for inspiring us, because it's easy to get lost in your work, and sometimes we see the gigantic task in front of us and we get desperate, right? And I think connecting to people like you who all want to change the world is really refreshing, and it gives me hope that there is energy out there to transform what we need to transform. So this is like resetting ourselves and getting ready for a big game and a big change. So thank you for doing that. It takes some logistics and some energy to do that, but it's really worth it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And that will do it for us for today, everyone. Another brilliant panel. George, Tom, my God, you are hitting one home run after another. I feel inspired and motivated in a way that I haven't felt in some time by the quality of the people that you're bringing together. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for it. Looking forward to the session tomorrow, and looking forward, everyone, to seeing how we can, at this moment in history, when, as Marie Noel said, our backs are to the wall, what is the move that we can make as a global community who care passionately about this earth and about the human future? How can we come together in a more sophisticated, enhanced way through the power of one and the power of us and the many to save humanity and our ecosystem at this moment? So in that spirit, I want to thank all of you for this time you've spent with us today. It's deeply appreciated. You are all welcome to the after session chat group. The link is in the chat box, and we'll see you all here again, same time, same station tomorrow for Humanity Rising. Thanks so much, Bye for now.
Yeah.